So nice to see you. Familiar faces, couple of new faces. Thanks for coming today. So I'm Susan Campbell, and this is one of my favorite topics that I almost never talk or write about anymore. It's what can you realistically expect in a relationship? I used to give lectures on this back in the 80s, and there's a whole chapter on it in my book, Truth in Dating, if you want to see how I used to think about that, because that book was written like in 2003. But today you're going to get my updated ideas about this. And some of them were in the newsletter that most of you got. So the way I'm going to organize this is the first half, I'm going to say a few things about boundaries and expectations and invite you all to weigh in on some questions like how do you know you're loved, that sort of thing. So that'll be the first half. And then in the second half of today, I want to get into some of what I call the naive expectations that very intelligent people who've been to a lot of workshops still kind of can't get rid of some of our naive expectations. So um, that'll be later, and that'll go a little deeper. So first part's kind of a warm up. So start by just reminding us that even though humans have kind of the same basic needs to feel loved and supported, safe, those kinds of things, like I matter, we've all grown up a little bit differently in how our preferences show up and what are the must-haves in a relationship and what are the things that I will not accept. So I want to do a boundaries exercise with you guys at first, just to help us get an overview of what maybe I haven't thought about this much. Like, what do I ideally want in a relationship? And maybe think in terms of a special friend or a loving partner or marriage or dating type of thing. What do I ideally want in that kind of an intimate partnership? And then we'll look at what will I tolerate and then what's completely unacceptable to me. And we'll get to see what other people feel about these questions. Okay, so I used to do this exercise back in the 80s with large groups. So I've written down some of the things that they have said they will and won't accept. And then I'm going to ask you to add your own. But this is a show of hands exercise. So keep your hand up long enough so that other people can see, am I the only one, or is everybody kind of like me, that sort of thing. Because I kind of think we like to know how we compare to other people in terms of our expectations of relationship. So the first topic is, what do I ideally want? We'll get into must-haves a little bit later, but this is like almost like a must-have, but you might not always think you can have it. So it's, what do I ideally want? So raise your hand if this is true of you, and if you've got a ding or going on in the background, probably finished off by now anyway. But if you have sound in the background, we don't need sound, but also I'm available, and I want to make the group available for comments and questions all during this. This isn't like, heavy duty, you got to mind the teacher kind of a interaction here. But I do like to, give you some exercises. So how many people, this is what do I ideally want or prefer, likes sex and has some skill in this area? Show of hands. Let's take a look. Okay. Next one. Has good personal hygiene. Maybe I never think about that, but okay. Keep that in mind, folks. Generous with time or money. This is ideally now. It's not a must-have. Okay, it's nice we have a lot of ideals. Likes to spend time with me. Some of them probably get two hands, this one might for some of us. Likes to cuddle and touch. Take our time, see everybody. Leave your hand up for a while so people can see it. Okay. Communicates clearly. Honest. I often say everybody values honest communication, but how many of us have the necessary skills to do that? So that's sort of one of the motivations for the work I do. Has a spiritual sense of being part of something more than just a separate self. Similar economic background. Again, this is ideally, but at least it's something you value. Physically fit. Two hands there, Arthur. Hi. Similar political or religious beliefs. Similar level of intelligence. Okay, and the last one on my list, but then you can add your own, is similar eating habits. Okay, can see some values here. And obviously, some of those were stronger than others. Now, if anybody wants to be sure you're unmuted so you can add something. Any other things you're curious about what people ideally want in relationships? Okay, go ahead, Dusty.
Definitely sense of humor.
Oh, yeah. All right. Let's see you show it that one.
Two
Yeah.
hands.
I don't know why that one wasn't on my list. These are from workshops that I used to do in the 80s. Pretty similar. So other people have something to add, like Debbie. And did I see Ava's hand up and then Arthur's hand are all up for adding something? Well, let me ask you, Debbie, first, and then Arthur, and then Ava.
At least some of the same interests that I have.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay. Arthur, what was yours?
Similar life goals, especially maybe as it pertains to things like where you want to live, whether you want to have children,
Yes.
et cetera, et cetera. A lot of those kinds of bigger things around life.
Yeah. Okay. How many people want that ideally? And maybe again, for some cases, you can say ideally and it could still be a must-have also. And Ava?
Um, Author just took mine.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It was sort of an obvious one and didn't get on the list. Dusty, do you have another one?
Values family and connection.
Values, family, and connection. And it's not a big deal for some people. Let's see if there was anything on them. Oh, one other one that was on the list that the people in my groups used to say is interpersonal growth. All right. Okay, any comments? Oh, Arthur, you got another one? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not really sure exactly how to frame this one, except that it maybe pertains to certain aspects of lifestyle, like liking to go to bed early or like at the same time, like not necessarily wanting to, go out late, and so on. Just kind of having similarly oriented approaches to lifestyle, schedule, etc.
Yeah, yeah. That sounds good. I'll raise my hand on that one. How about you guys? Okay, so got another one, Arthur? No, that hand just takes a while to go down. So the next one is, what can I accept even though I might get upset or even angry about it? Like I can accept being unhappy with the person sometimes. So that's the frame here. So this is a little different. What can I accept? First one on the list is somebody who gets triggered but gets over it. I can accept that. Or, I mean, yeah, just accept now. You don't necessarily put it on your ideal list here. Okay. Okay. Somebody who gets jealous. And I bet you'll have some comments about that, such as, well, it depends on how they behave when they're jealous. So yeah, but let's say at least the feeling. Differing religious views. How many could accept that in an intimate partnership? Mm-hmm. Differing political views. I'm putting those in two separate categories this time. Different political views. You could accept that. Not ideal, but depending on all these other things. My self-talk right now. Some of us are probably pretty rigid about that one. Some of us not so much. All right. Any other comments? But let's help us see that that even within this Getting Real community, there's an array of preferences here. We're not all the same. We know that, but it's kind of good to see it on the screen.
Can I comment on the political piece?
Yeah, please.
Does that include environmental and I mean, it's like such a big topic. The
it is a big
political,
topic, sure.
Yeah, and as well as just kind of reality check.
Yeah, well, that probably would come more under values, but values are expressed in your political views. So, let's just say similar values about the care of the earth and right relationship with nature and the earth. Okay, how many people would like, let's say, we'll see what I can accept. These are somebody who doesn't have that, who's different from you in that is what we're asking for now. That probably could have been on the ideally want. Yes, I want that. But you could accept somebody who's not like that.
I think it depends a lot
And
on
again, to a degree and so forth. And of course it depends. What does it depend on for you, Arthur?
I think it depends on just how big a part of their life it is. I mean, if there are different views, then if they're very strongly held views and it's a big part of their life, that's more likely to be an unacceptable mismatch. But if they're weakly held or they're not really a big part of their life, and it's not really operationally a big part of the relationship, then that's totally acceptable.
That's a good addition. And I'm imagining that kind of statement could also be relevant to differing political views or religious views. I mean, if they never think about it and they never talk about it, you can easily accept it.
I have something to add, Susan.
Yes.
What matters to me is how strongly the essential, like the core ways that I know that I'm connected and loved are. Like when those are really strong, then these other, I can accept a lot of things that might not be ideal.
Yeah. That's a great one to reflect on, I think. Each one of the items we could probably reflect on that. Oh, can we give that up if we feel loved and cherished, and that's the more essential value, because there certainly is a hierarchy of all these values, which we haven't tried to make. We're just doing a quick survey here. Other comment?
I just want to, off of what Dex said, it reminded me of something someone had posted on their dating profile, which is they don't have any radicalized or polarizing, beliefs. I mean, they believe in what they believe in, but it's not to the extent that they feel the need to, radically push others away or feel like radically theirs is more important than others. But be able to have a communal ability to believe what you believe, but bygones.
Yeah. So we could kind of call it respect for differences or something.
Sure. Yeah.
Like that. So could I accept somebody who's narrow-minded and it's like my way is the only right way? How many people could accept that kind of my way is it? You could accept it, maybe given some other values obviously are there for you. So haven't got very many hands on that one, but we got one at least. Thank you. Yeah, it's good to stand out in the crowd.
In some ways, I actually prefer that, but there are a lot of qualifications and discussion to be had around that, and I'm definitely not hijacking this meeting.
Yeah, okay, but thank you. Yeah. We're seeing in these little simplistic questionnaire type of exercises, there's an awful lot of layers to this and caveats and conditions.
Yeah, I just again don't want to hijack, but just going on with I've often used the example of like saying if you're a Nazi, then like advertise that you're a Nazi so that you can meet other Nazis and you guys can get along together, and you actually it's like whatever you are, if you're whatever it is, advertise it so that you can meet those people.
Yeah, like if you're on a dating site, it would be good to put whether you're monogamous or not.
Right.
I think some people don't want to get into this discussion because they might send people, they might lose candidates.
Right.
Well, okay, good luck then. Just that's your choice, because that might be something you need to work out. Now, that's one of the reasons why we have these different preferences, because there's different paths, we could call it, different growth paths. So now let's see, I got some more what I can accept here, just a few more. How many people could accept some addictive behaviors? And maybe even say what ones you could accept. We don't have to go into the ones you won't accept right now. We'll get to that. Some addictive behaviors. You want to mention which ones you would accept?
Nail biting.
Nail biting. I could say overthinking.
Addiction to chocolate.
Addiction to chocolate. That sounds pretty harmless. What other addictions could just call it out?
Scrolling.
Yeah. Television.
Picking at dermatological phenomena.
On yourself? Or on you? Okay, never mind. Anybody else have any more addictions you could accept? Overeating. How many people could accept food addiction? Again, it probably depends on the the degree, some degree of it. Mm-hmm. A lot of us have that. A lot of us also have overthinking. I can accept that one. Geez, I'd be real lonely if I couldn't. I wouldn't have anybody come to my workshops. All right. We've talked about some of these, but how many people could accept lack of fitness or slash some health problems? How many people could accept that? Actually, you might be mixed on those. How many people could accept lack of fitness first? Lack of fitness. I see Arthur. I'm reading into your nonverbal, Arthur. No way. Okay. And then some health problems. You could accept somebody with some health problems. If you're my age, you basically got no choice. Not much of a field. Okay. Thank you. It's nice. Nice group here.
Although I think it's funny that those are theoretically related.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I believe they are. And yet, I don't know.
I mean, there are.
I'll just say what came to my mind, which is I'm very fit, always have been, and I have blood cancer. So, I but I just want to reassure people it's not affecting my quality of life at all. So it's like it's pretty good kind to have, and I don't have to take chemo. So it's the best kind to have in my book, if you're gonna have it. All right. What I won't accept, and this is something a lot of people don't think much about until something happens and you realize, wow, that is unacceptable. And that's okay. That's okay. But I'm just polling us to get a feel for the range of what people won't accept. And this is like, you wouldn't consider a person if you knew this about them. Physical violence. They do physical violence toward you or toward your child or toward someone. Physical violence.
In the present, not in the past.
In the present. We may have had to go through a phase where we had to deal with this and we accepted it. But how many people right now? No way.
No, I mean the other person.
What do you mean? What's your question?
Whether it's accepting that the other person in the past has committed physical violence versus they are currently.
Oh, currently. I'm talking about currently. Yeah. People can change. Okay, well, that was a big one. Like a raging person, it would be more like a rageaholic or something like that. I mean, I haven't even ever experienced this, but I know it exists. Raging. How many people won't accept that? Oh, I would say I won't accept that. It's just too stressful. Any comments there?
Just when you said that, I was thinking like uncontrollable, irresponsible anger.
Yeah.
The thought that came to mind.
Yeah. Could also say lack of impulse control with regard to. And in my worldview, this often has something to do with lack of verbal skill. It's like when people can't express themselves, whether it's through repression or external oppression or whatever, rage comes out. It seems, I'm a psychologist, so, things are all related.
I just had a thought.
Inner stuff is all related. Yes.
Sort of the opposite of that is someone who is passive aggressive and stuffs their anger, and yet it gets acted out in strange ways that are unacceptable.
Uh-huh. Okay. I would say for me, it depends on how it gets acted out. Because I have a feeling there's a lot of passive aggressive behavior
Yes.
in the world that I don't even notice because I'm that type of person. I don't go looking for,
Where it gets acted out as harm in some way, shape, or form, or
yeah.
retaliation, or
Okay. Okay. How many people would not accept that the way Don expressed it there? Passive aggressive, acted out in a harmful way. I guess so.
I just want to put it up on one of the previous lists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just mention that also seems to go communicating clearly with the ideal wants. The passive aggressive seems to be already kind of crossed off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you could communicate clearly and if you had enough self-awareness to know what you were feeling, and that's the hard part for some people, then you wouldn't act out in those ways.
Susan, I just wanted to say that inside myself, with a lot of the questions, it's there's no black or white, there's only shades of gray. And there's the times I've held strongly to my values and the times I haven't. And I have done all of these things personally. I have raged. I have been passive aggressive. I have, it's so it's inside myself. I'm like, yeah, but it's not black and white. And I know you're not, that's not how you're meaning it to be, but I just feel inside myself like a resistance kind of to, because we can be all these things. To say we won't accept something, like I have said, I lived in a violent home and I said very strongly I would never put up with it, and I have.
Well, that's a good perspective for sure. That sometimes this is our values. This is just a value statement, and I'm not promoting anything. I'm just
right. And I totally get that.
What I can accept, that would be a very long list for some of us, And of course, there's always it depends on how much my real biggest needs are met, like what Dexter was saying.
Yeah, like addictive behaviors, that one, like what we'll accept as addictive behaviors. Well, are we owning it? Are we talking about the addictive behavior? Are we actively in the addictive behavior? Do we, or being dishonest or about monogamy, for instance, are you being transparent and authentic, or are you being out overtly dishonest? I don't know. So yeah, anyways, I just
got one on here, which is back to, I hadn't gotten to it on the list yet, which is lying, but owning up to it. And then there's lying and not owning up to it. So this is, again, what's outside your boundaries. What would make you end a relationship? Would lying, catching somebody in a lie, is that a total no for you? Raise your hand if it is. This is lying without owning up to it. Would be a total no. But again, the next question would be lying, but owning up to it and repairing it, being able to admit that. I've forgiven people easily about that, but the other one, not.
And then there's lying and owning up to it and repeating the behavior over and over and over again.
Oh, that'll still happen. That'll still happen, folks. That's when I get to naive expectations, like don't expect just because they've owned up and apologized, that's going to change. Okay. That came up. Well, go ahead. Let's stay on
I just wanted to say on a number of these, as we've been going through this, I've been thinking to myself, like, for example, with political views and religious views, I've been thinking to myself just the thought of, yeah, things are okay until they're not okay. There's a tolerant there wherever wherever we have a line, it's like, Oh yeah, I'm totally fine with that. I'm totally fine with that. All of a sudden it's like, nope, I'm not fine with this anymore. Like,
Yeah.
they just crossed whatever line I have in my head.
Yes. Yes. Maybe the line was, I would hoping this would change, but now I see it's never going to change.
Sure.
I
Or
mean, that's just
or
one
I
thing.
was hoping I could be okay with it.
Yes.
And I've
Yes.
gotten to a point where I'm like, I'm no longer okay with this.
Yes. Yes. And that can actually um, be part of your own development, but it can also be the stage of relationship that you're
Yeah.
at. I'm going to talk
Yeah.
about that around when I get to the next part. Arthur?
Yeah, similar to that, you may also think that you absolutely need something or absolutely won't tolerate something, and then you are okay with it.
Exactly. That's
Go without it.
extremely common, I think. Yep. And just notice it. It's not like we're trying to say, okay, this is my value, and if I violate it, I'm this horrible person. It's what can I learn about myself? Oh, I thought I was firm on this, but I just don't want to be alone at this stage of my life or whatever. No. Okay, so the last one I just want to mention it just because it came up in this group that I led one time. A gun in the house. I won't tolerate having a gun in the house. Anybody anybody raise their hand to that one? I mean, that one's sort of like what? You know, not that I'm pro or anti-gun. I mean, I do have a gun in the house. I just don't know how to use it. Okay, so I'm not, I'm nowhere with that one. But how many people would not tolerate a gun in the house? Anyone? Mm-hmm. It's good to know that. And sometimes there are really good reasons for that. So we don't have to go into that because it's not a very common thing that people think about. But like I said before, and I'm done with the survey now, we can just comment on it and then I'll go on. But it's it's just good to every once in a while check in. Now, okay, I've just said on this webinar that these are my values. What am I kind of okay with, even though those are my values? And how many people can accept yourself? So this is not about boundaries or anything. How many people can accept yourself, even though you may sometimes have one set of values theoretically and another set that you operate by at times, that you compromise your own values? How many people can accept yourself when you do that? Any other comments about this kind
I
of
feel
thing?
like by accept yourself, meaning I do accept myself. I don't consciously accept it. Like this is unacceptable, but I do accept that this is what I'm doing.
It's an attitude. When I say accept myself, it's an attitude of, all right, there's inconsistencies in your personality and you can live with them just fine. That's what I kind of mean.
That question brings
Yeah.
up another, what I won't accept is a lack of forgiveness.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And sometimes that's one you in the first stages of a relationship, there might not be anything to forgive, but as you go through life together, there's more and more to forgive, and you realize, oh no, what am I doing here with this person? Okay, Arthur, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I mean, with respect to accepting yourself, if you have failed your values, I think it depends a lot on what exactly you mean. I mean, first, what kind of values are we talking about, right? I mean, I have a lot of aspirations and values around things like getting in bed at a decent hour, but I fail those professed values often when things get in the way. On the other hand, there are things that are utterly inviolate, like being honest. So I would not be able to accept inconsistencies in myself around honesty. So I think it really depends on whether we're talking about, let's call it a philosophical or ideological value versus an optional or superficial level value. And then I think it also depends a lot on what you mean by accept, right? Like I accept that I have done things. Like I have certainly been dishonest about things in the past, but in a way I don't accept that as okay. Mm-hmm. And so I've taken steps to not do that anymore.
Yeah.
And learn my lessons from that. So, in that sense, I don't accept it, but I accept the fact of it, but not like proscriptively. Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's a good distinction there. Thank you. Other comment? Okay, I'm going to switch over to the section where I think if people understood relationships the way I'm going to articulate, like if they understood attachment styles, and I'm going to talk about that, differing attachment styles and how some people are wired to feel safe when everything's quiet and you're happy over there and I'm happy over here, or whatever, and other people are wired to only feel really safe if there's some exchange going on, that type of thing. And I don't mean this literally exactly, but if they're feeling like the other person is there for them, that's like a big deal, and for other people that's not the biggest deal. So if we can understand some of these sorts of let's say it, research findings from psychology and interpersonal behavior. So the first one I want to mention is back in the 70s, and the book came out in 1980. I interviewed over 100 couples for the book, The Couple's Journey, and it turned out, I asked them how their relationship had changed over time. And I'll just speak about the first 2 stages of the couple's journey. I came up with 5 stages. The first stage I call the romance stage, but what I could see from talking to all these people is the task of the romance stage has to do with bonding and making sure your vision and values are aligned, that sort of thing. And that might be helpful just to think about that. The early stage emphasizes similarities, and you're also often, because of that in love kind of vibe, you're just generally more forgiving. It's like you're on MDMA or something, you're just more like loving, and in both ways. Now some people enter relationships more suspicious and combative, but generally speaking the typical relationship emphasizes just acceptance, and once there's kind of a nice bond, and things are a little more safe, this is not such a strange person, will they accept me? Then once safety occurs in a relationship, then your differences start to surface. And not that the differences weren't there before, but something Scott said earlier reminds me of this shift from the romance to the power struggle stage. I could tolerate that just fine, but now actually I'm safer, and so I'm allowing more of my subconscious or my unconscious needs and preferences and values to come up from my unconscious and become conscious and go, wait a minute, this doesn't feel that good anymore. I used to think that was cute, but now it hurts my feelings, that sort of thing. And those changes, they just seem to be part of the natural developmental arc of things, but in this case it's intimate relationships. So the work of the power struggle stage is to actually hear and listen to and be present to somebody who differs from you and who maybe disagrees with you, and underneath that, you have reactions to that, like a threat response and that sort of thing, which gets you in touch with deeper needs that aren't quite being addressed, or things that you thought you could tolerate but you can't. So relationships will, the main point I want to make, because the naive expectation is we're just going to be in harmony like this, and conflict shouldn't happen. If we can expect that there's going to be some conflict and some learning to listen to things that are hard for you to listen to. I'm wondering if I'm going to go to participant.
It's Denise. Denise isn't muted, Susan.
Looks like she is muted, though.
She wasn't, though. It kept lighting up.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so she must have just muted herself.
Now
Thanks
she is.
for catching that. Okay, so can somebody remind me where I was? Because I got distracted there. Anybody can say what I was just talking about?
Yeah, you were talking about how we get to deeper needs and get in touch with, once we've pair
Listening to
bonded.
differences. Yeah. And so the developmental task really is learning to hold your own center and not lose yourself while listening to somebody say, when you didn't come home, when you told me you were going to come home, I felt abandoned, I felt betrayed, and I'm really angry at you, and don't ever do that again. So learning to field those kinds of communications is a huge developmental task in the maturing of a human. And if you always had total harmony in the relationship, you would never have to stretch your comfort zone, so you could hold differences. And holding differences is a very advanced personal skill, being able to truly listen and be interested in a point of view that's different from your own. So the naive expectation is that we'll be able to finally come to an agreement. We're going to get to resolution, and they're going to see how much that hurt me, that they came home late and didn't call, and they won't do it again. The important thing with these disappointments and letdowns, sometimes you ought to make an effort to give your partner what they say they want, but some people can't change those deeply ingrained habits. And the partner will think, gee, I told them like 5 times or 10 times that I didn't like that. And they say they're sorry and they don't change. For a lot of those kind of things, they're based on deeper personality patterns that you can work through. You can keep looking deeper and clearing away resistances to being controlled, and habits. You can develop better communication habits and so forth. But a lot of these things are just part of the person's, you could almost say, wiring, and they're not going to change. And some of my wiring, my expecting that is not going to change, and being hurt by it. So the best we can do is learn to communicate about it in a good way. And it's your choice how much of that type of conflict that you want to handle in a relationship. If it's too overwhelming to your nervous system and you're getting triggered all the time, you can choose to stay because your nervous system is still evolving and learning and not getting too overwhelmed, and you're not feeling like you're in trauma reaction all the time. But some people, if they have that much conflict, they can't handle it, so they have to move on. Because I mean, for me, your physical health is like primary, and your nervous system regulation is primary. Now, hopefully, if we've learned some of these tools for self-regulation and so forth, we can tolerate a lot more of reality as it is. That doesn't mean you're overlooking what's going on. But the key thing is to expect it to hurt sometime. Because if you expect it won't, you're going to be making up ideas about what should be happening and make your decisions on that. So that's just one thing I want to make sure people remember, that you need to go into relationships expecting there will be bumps. And I don't mean expect like, where's the next bump? But knowing that could come, and there's some skills you can learn, like listening to the person even though you disagree, and letting them know that you're interested. And if their reality totally is a mismatch with your reality, that might be one of your trigger reactions that you need to look into, or it might be cause to end the relationship. No, we don't know. It's situational.
Susan, this reminds me.
Yeah, go ahead.
John Gottman's research that couples can tolerate conflict as long as there's a 5-to-1 ratio between difficult things like you were just talking about and 5 supportive things. So there's a
that's a good finding. My attitude is you can tolerate a lot more if you can talk about it in a good way afterwards, because so much of what happens in relationship are kind of like falling out of harmony, looking at why, what was going on in you that was afraid, what made you afraid about that situation, the other person not coming home when they said they were gonna. What made me afraid? What's in me? So that's all the trigger work that I often teach on these webinars. So if you can do your trigger work and you get somewhere with that, with each other, and you know how to actually repair, and repair doesn't mean going over it and talking about it and saying your same point of view again. It means revealing what triggered you and taking responsibility for your own trigger, and saying something like, I'm sorry I reacted that way. You didn't deserve it. If there was a harmful reaction, but being able to own your own triggers, that's the main thing that's reparative, and help the person know that you're not holding that judgmental story about them anymore. So repair is coming forth with a new attitude. It's not just, well, maybe I said that a little too harshly. Let me say it in another way. That's not repair. Ava, your comment.
Yeah, thank you, Susan, for that. That's very helpful. I was also thinking about John Gottman too. Like he talked about 70% of the conflict is perpetual. And it's just built into the personality differences of the couple.
Absolutely. And that was basically the next point I wanted to make, that has to do with attachment styles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. I wanted to talk about something else that
sure.
came for me, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
So I was visiting my sister in New York last week, and we got into a fight at, my last night there, of course. And we tried to talk it out, but she's 25, and when I asked her like, hey, X happened, can you tell me more about it? Like, what led you to feeling the way that you felt, blah blah blah. She's like, I don't know, I just felt that way, and I'm not a psychologist. Like she's not really in a frame of mind to practice some of the things that you mentioned. So what do you do in those situations when you have a partner or somebody in your life that isn't quite open to?
Oh, that's a really good question. That's super good, because so many people assume that the other person is up for this kind of relating, but they never created a context for it to be safe for both people. They never got agreement that we are going to clear the air in an honest way as part of our sisterhood or part of our friendship. call it the truth. In the book Truth in Dating, I map out how do you invite somebody in to be your practice partner, even if we're just dating. I like you, you like me. Honesty doesn't come naturally to a lot of people in this situation. You know, we tend to hold back and things like that. And this could be done in a friendship, a marriage, a family member, where you invite somebody to in a sense, be your practice partner, because the outside culture who doesn't we don't the outside culture just does, you know, it doesn't just naturally clear the air on a regular basis as part of a conversation. It's usually a skill that people need some help feeling supported in, and they need to be ready for like a clearing conversation. Like when I say a clearing conversation, I mean, when I heard you say that, I felt this, and this was the impact it had on me. Um, how do you view that? Do you remember that scenario? Okay, how was it for you? You know, that's a clearing conversation, but you have to set the context to make these conversations safe for yourself. You have to say, can we talk about something that I've been thinking about our relationship? At least that much. So you can set the context in a given moment, or you can have that as the context for your, let's say, dating relationship or your marriage, where we're going to do the practice, like kind of what you said, Ava. I mean, you're doing a one-sided practice there, and that was great, you know. And sometimes you can do that, and it'll, especially the way you did it, sounded quite skillful. I thought, you know, you asked her, you know, about herself, so it's not just a one-way thing. A lot of people who take a few workshops, they just dump everything out, and then they come back and say to me, you know, it didn't work. It didn't work when I said to my husband, when you did this, I felt this. I go, well, does he like doing that kind of thing? Does he value that? Have you had the conversation where you both agree that that's part of what your relationship is? So there's one of those naive expectations that I'll now check off the list. I think you got the idea. You know, there needs to be mutual agreement. And you can keep, you know, if the person, I mean, you can try it once, and like your sister, you can assume, well, she doesn't value this kind of stuff. Or you can give a little more of a sales pitch, like, you know, I really value our friendship and I want us to grow in that. And I think one of the ways is if I get to say things to you that bother me, I can get over them and we can get back to feeling close. Do you see any value in that kind of thing, and maybe trying it a couple of times with me? So, you know, you can push it a little harder, give it a little sales pitch if you dare. Sometimes they'll say, yes, I want to do it, but then they won't be able to do it. And then you can, you know, keep selling it or keep modeling it, or, you know, keep pestering them, whatever. So next item on my list of things we should be aware of if we don't want to get disappointed all the time is the idea that what I need to feel safe. For example, I'll give you John and Mary. Okay, what Mary needs to feel safe is knowing my partner is interested in me, asks me a lot of questions about myself, initiates contact with me, and even initiates clearing the air, because they do have an agreement to clear the air. So this is John and Mary, a married couple. So she says, well, you know, I always ask you questions, John. You know, I'm always very interested in what you're thinking, and what, you know, what's wrong? Why don't you do that with me? And John's not that same attachment style. So Mary's attachment style, we could call it preoccupied anxious, you know, that's the jargon. But basically her fear is being alone. If we're not interacting in a certain way, then I feel like I'm all alone, or I'm the only one who's cares about the relationship. some of you may identify with that one. You know, why am I doing all the work in the relationship? John, that's not that nourishing to him to have her ask him a bunch of questions. His basic need is to feel accepted, to feel that Mary's happy over there, happy with him. His core fear has more to do with he's not worried about being alone or being abandoned or that. He's worried about, am I enough? Am I acceptable? Am I okay? Am I okay with you? And of course, the more she demands him to be different, the more that triggers his not okay feelings, and the more he behaves from his angle is, I'm a very tolerant person. I can accept, Mary being upset some of the time, or I can, I can accept a lot of things. I don't have that much need for other people to treat me a certain way. Okay, they had rather different childhood experiences, and I won't go into that right now. That's in some of my books, 5-Minute Relationship Repair and From Trigger to Tranquil, and it's in a lot of the literature around in psychology. But it's important to realize that what she gives easily, she thinks is that he likes, and he doesn't like it. I mean, even though he might say he doesn't, I mean, he doesn't like it. She doesn't get it, because in her naive worldview is that's the way you show love. Lisa, you have a hand up? Question? Comment?
Yes, thank you. I have a question in regards to that because like my current main issue, which also brought me to this call, is it relates to like this feeling of doing all the work in a relationship, or whether I really matter to people, and it pertains more to my friendships, because there's just this pattern that in basically like all of my friendships, I feel like I do 80% at least of the initiating of actual time spent together, just the getting in touch and actually making a meeting happen. Yeah, and that like recently I've gotten so frustrated about that I just stopped doing my part because I don't want it to just be like my part. And yeah, now I'm in the situation that I feared would happen. So yeah, I'm
Hey, I
like,
got some
they are
advice.
not,
I got some advice. Lisa. I had a house guest here this weekend who had a similar situation, and it particularly was with her cousin, because she was about to go visit her cousin after seeing us. And her feeling was, gee, I always do all the initiating. Does my cousin or other people, do they really value me? So what I suggested, try this on, Lisa, is first start with painting the picture. Cousin, here's my experiences. Most of the time when we get together, I'm the one who reaches out. In fact, maybe every time, I'm not sure there. And then we get together, and that's fine. But I don't remember you actually ever initiating with me. Do you see it that way? Was the first statement. And then I'd like to hear how you feel about that. And I want to tell you how I feel. What comes up for me is I sometimes wonder if you value the friendship, or, what if I never reached out? Would you ever reach out to me? And say something like that. And what's your angle on that? And so then the cousin, actually, she left, so I didn't find out how the conversation went. But my intuition was the cousin was fine with the way it was and liked having her initiate. But maybe they got somewhere with that whole discussion. So that's a thought, Lisa. What do you think?
Yeah, thanks. It absolutely makes sense. It's just a little daunting with like how many people I would have to go through that conversation. And as you said in that story, I'm also pretty sure that the people
I have been in this pattern with so far that they are very comfortable
Yeah.
with this, you
Yeah, but
know?
they may not know that you're not comfortable. And you
Yeah.
get to share that, and you get to
Yeah.
share a little bit more about the meaning underneath it. And look, try it with one person. I mean, I'm going to say if that's happening, and you know that's very up for you in your life right now, this is a growth edge for you that is an opportunity. Okay, so that's my sales pitch to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Try it with the
Absolutely.
easiest person first, you know, the safest person.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
I'll look. Okay, so I think I don't have access to my clock anymore here. What time is it? 11:02. So my last, I think I'll just end with kind of summarizing this idea here of different attachment styles being kind of wedded to each other, even attracted to each other. I think there's an evolutionary purpose to why opposites attract, because it does force you. So I'm glad Lisa spoke, because it does force you into conversations that are going to stretch your comfort zone and particularly help you see that my angle on things is my unique angle, and it's not the way everybody should feel. And I'm not going to automatically project that expectation on you. I'm going to be, you know, if there seems to be a miscommunication, I'm going to be curious about your idea about what's happening and where that might be coming from in you. So the why opposites attract notion is for a personal evolution. And I do believe that, I don't know if it's this stage in human evolution, but we are being called on to think more systemically, to think more in terms of how I am with you, if I'm a safe person to be with, and I'm really open and available, that's going to affect you. And how you are with me affects me. And the idea that I am in a situation that is uncomfortable for me, but I can create a new context by naming what's going on and inviting you into that conversation. So there are all these evolutionary skills that have to do with being able to have respect for differences, integrate differences, so that we have more of a sense of our interrelatedness. And I do believe that that is the direction of evolution. Systems theory is, I'm a big fan of systems theory. And that set of theories says that the healthy system is got good communication between subparts and is evolving through the increasing relatedness of differentiated parts. Okay, that's very technical, but it always helps me to kind of feel like I'm part of this bigger system and we're evolving together, and we've got some choice in the next steps here. So that's my little pitch for why differences and conflict are necessary at this time. I think dealing with differences is one of the two biggest challenges of our time. And the other one is dealing with exponential change. So talk about that some other time. All right. Thanks, you guys. I'm going to go now. See you next month. Oh, by the way, I'm going to be taking the summer off. I did that last summer too, June, July, and August. And I'm just going to not work and see what happens. And I'll be back in September, but I'll have one more of these in May. And then that's it for a while. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Susan.
Okay, bye.
Love
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.